Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live stream with Codecademy. I'm your host, Fede, and I'm joined today with the incredible career coach, Madeleine Eames Keogh. Madeleine is an MBA that has pivoted her own career, has pivoted her own career 3 times from sign language interpreter to product manager, project manager to instructional designer to career coach. She considers herself a multipotentiality, sorry for the pronunciation of that, and believes strongly in meshing one's varied interests to build a fruitful career. I see in the chat that we already have a lot of activity from people, and Madeleine actually asked just a little bit ago what you're hoping to get out of this live stream. So if you can please drop in the chat just why you're here today. Are you looking for a career in tech? Are you looking to pivot? Are you trying to leverage what you already know to find opportunities somewhere else? We'll be super happy to hear your thoughts on that, and Madeleine will be going through some of those later. There will be Q&A pauses throughout this presentation, so if you have questions, comments, things that you want to bring up, I encourage you all to save those questions for the Q&A. If you do ask the questions during the chat while Madeleine is presenting, we'll do our best to come back and pick up those questions so they don't get lost in the chat, but otherwise just please save them for the Q&A section. And with that, I pass it on to you, Madeleine. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Fede, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, you let me know if you can't see that, but I really appreciate you all joining today. Welcome, everybody. I am Madeleine Eames Keogh. I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk about how to pivot careers by breaking down the process into manageable and actionable steps. I want to thank Codecademy and Fede for inviting me to host this live stream. Let's dive in. Okay, I'm going to walk you through our agenda for today. We will start with an introduction that will include what you'll walk away with after this training is over, and a brief background on me and why I'm here today. Then we'll talk about what pivoting even means, and I will share my pivoting story. Then we'll get to the meat of the training today, where I will walk you through my 7 tips on how to pivot careers, and you will do short and independent activities related to each tip. And then finally, we will wrap up with a recap, some goal setting, and we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So I'd like to note that this is going to be a hands-on training where you will be an active participant. As you'll see in a minute, my background is in adult education, and research has shown that you will get more out of this training if you fully participate. Basically, you get out what you put in. So I highly recommend you do these independent activities so that you can walk away from this session with a tangible game plan. And don't worry, as Fede said, I believe this live stream is being recorded, so you are welcome to revisit anything we discussed today at a later time. So first, some quick info to get us started. Here is a high-level summary of what you will walk away with today. A better idea of if you are ready to pivot careers, a high-level understanding of what is involved in pivoting careers, and a resource with actionable steps you can take to start pivoting your career today. I'd also like to note that this training is geared toward people who know what they want to do next, but aren't sure how to get there. So if you are struggling to figure out what your next step even is, you don't know what you want to do, please feel free to reach out and book a 30-minute career coaching consultation with me. We can discuss your goals and your roadblocks, my offerings and recommendations, and we can see if we'd like to work together. So real quick, I will just put in the chat a link if you are interested in booking a consultation. All right. A little bit about me to kick things off. I am Madeleine Eames Keogh. I currently work in learning and development and as a career coach. I specialize in helping new grads, young professionals, and career pivoters like yourselves. As Fede said, I have pivoted my own career 3 times. More on that later. I live on the beautiful coast of southern Maine. My husband and I recently bought a house, and we joke that half the reason we bought this house was for our dog to have a house. So you could say that I am a dog enthusiast. Feel free to check out my About page on my website for a photo of my pup. Okay, so let's dive into our main topic for the day. So what is pivoting? No, it is not this, and hopefully not as stressful as this. For those who don't know, this is one of the most iconic scenes in the TV show Friends, one of my favorites. But in all seriousness, here is how author and career strategist Jenny Blake defines it in her book titled Pivot. A career pivot means doubling down on what is working to make a purposeful shift in a new related direction. Pivoting is an intentional and methodical process for nimbly navigating career changes. So pivoting means changing careers, but it could be a small pivot, like from copywriter to copy editor, or a really big pivot, like from high school history teacher to data scientist. In both cases, the pivoter learns to leverage their current skills and knowledge, build new skills and knowledge, and take purposeful steps towards their career goal. And it is true that some jobs require a specific degree where you have to go back to school to make a career change. For example, a lot of healthcare professions, but many, many don't, in particular, the tech industry. And we're going to focus on those jobs today. So let me tell you about my pivoting story to set the stage a little bit. After earning my bachelor's in psychology, which I really enjoyed studying, I had a great job at the American Psychological Association in Washington, D.C. So naturally, I did what any sane person would do. I went back to school for 2 years to study sign language interpreting. I was in this field for 7 years. And after graduating from my interpreting program, I worked as a project manager at a local university's sign language department, and I did freelance interpreting as a side gig as well. I also earned my MBA while working at this university. And over the years, I realized that I was interested in a language, but not much else related to this particular profession. It was the wrong fit because I only focused on my interest in the subject matter and not all the aspects that made up this career. I realized at that time that other than interpreting, the only other major skill on my resume was project management for my time at the university. So after I left my current job, I became, surprise, surprise, a project manager, basically by default, which is also not a great way to make a career decision. But as a super organized type A person, I thought this would be a great fit for me, and I was good at it. But again, over time, I realized that while I liked the organizational aspect of the job, it didn't allow for much freedom or creativity, which I came to learn are things that are important to me. So at that time, I reflected on my time working at the university, and I realized that what I enjoyed most was the educational content that we were building. I loved working with adult learners, helping them improve their skills, and this led to a much more strategic career move into instructional design, or the broader field of learning and development. This was the first time that I thoughtfully planned my pivot from one career to the next, and it worked. In my current project management role at a real estate company, I asked for opportunities to develop internal training for my team. And then I actually got laid off when COVID hit, but that was okay because I knew where I wanted to pivot to next. I then got a job as a project manager at an educational company, one step closer to being in the field of learning and development. And again, I asked for opportunities to build and run internal team training. I also spent time on the side earning instructional design certifications, networking with others in the field, and even volunteering as a learning and development manager to beef up my resume. I finally landed my first job as an instructional designer for the federal government. And I knew that the bureaucratic environment would not be a great fit for me long term, but I took the job as an opportunity to gain instructional design experience before landing the learning and development job that I'm in today. And then my current job, along with my years of experience as a mentor, exposed me to the world of coaching. And it was the first time I felt like I found something that truly combined everything I was interested in and everything I was good at. Psychology, helping others, adult education, business, being super organized, creativity, etc. I knew that my varied background, plus my personal experience pivoting careers 3 times, would be valuable to others at the beginning of their career journey, and thus launched my career coaching career. As you can see, my career path has not been straightforward, and that is okay. Over the years, new roads have presented themselves to me, and if I were not open-minded to them, I would not be where I am today. So I learned all the tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you today during my pivot from project manager to instructional designer. So I will focus on this particular part of my journey as I walk through each tip. So before we dive into my 7 tips, I'm going to pause real quick and see if you have any questions so far. I'll ask Fede if any questions have come up in the chat that we should address at this time. Love the Friends pivoting reference. Very nice, Jonathan. All right, seems like we're good to move on. It is time to talk through my 7 tips. In a minute, I will share a Google Doc with you all with all of the activities that you're going to be doing today. And you can make a copy of the document and write out your answers as we go. I promise that these activities will be useful to you, so I really do hope you participate in them. These tips will be broken up into 2 parts. The first part is the preparation you do before you are ready to pivot. And the second part is when you are ready to make that pivot happen. Let's start with preparation. The first tip is to take a minute to pause and reflect. This might seem trivial, but it is vital to developing a clear vision and direction. You might already know exactly what career you want to pivot into, but do you know why this career path interests you? Pivoting takes time and effort, so it's important to be intentional and methodical about exactly what you are aiming for, as Jenny Blake described in that previous quote. So ask yourself, why am I interested in pivoting careers? What problem are you trying to solve, or what vision are you trying to manifest for yourself? What does a successful career look like to me? What are you aiming for, or how will you know when you've gotten there? What do I fear, or what is holding me back? Career moves are scary, and it's totally normal to be anxious about it. It's important to understand your fears so that you can face them head on and they don't get the best of you. And what am I willing to sacrifice to make this pivot happen? When you say yes to something, you are saying no to basically everything else. So what are you willing to do, and what are you not willing to do to land this new career? When I realized that project management wasn't for me, I reflected on all the other aspects of my job that I enjoyed. I reflected on what was missing that I needed, what I was good at, etc. And this deep reflection helped me recognize that instructional design was a better fit for me. I'd also like to add that if you have no idea what you want to do next, you can watch another webinar that I've done that is called Passion is Overrated, which I will drop in the chat now. You are also welcome, as I said before, to book a free career coaching consultation with me. I will put both of these in the chat now. Sorry if they got a little bit funky looking. Okay, cool. Before we start our first activity, I will put the activity sheet in the chat for you all to open and to make a copy. This is a Google Doc that you should be able to open and make a copy of. So you're welcome to make a copy by either going to File, Make a Copy, or File, Download, and download as Microsoft Word. And then once you make a copy, you will be able to edit it and add all your answers for each activity. The one thing that I ask is that you don't read ahead and start working on activities before we get to them. You will get a lot more out of this training if you stay in the present moment. And after the webinar is over, this document is yours to keep, so don't feel rushed to complete everything today. You can always go back to it. Also,
Madeleine, sorry for interrupting for a second. It seems like maybe YouTube chat is moderating your links or something. They weren't going through. So if you pass them to me, I'll be happy to paste them in the chat.
sure, will do. Thank you for
All the chats that you were trying to share, yeah, all of them. That's just I'll pass them to me and I'll post them.
Okay, so I just gave you the activity sheet. And then here is the webinar on Passion is Overrated, and here is the free consultation link. I think that's everything. Thank you for catching that. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay. All right, so like I said, feel free to make a copy. Please don't read ahead, but we're going to get to everything, so don't worry about it. Also, if you are having trouble with the document or you just don't want to use it, that's totally fine. You are not required to use it. You're welcome to just open a blank Google Doc, a blank Word doc, a blank email for yourself, whatever you'd like to use to type up your answers for each activity. The activity sheet is helpful because it includes instructions for each activity, but I will also display those on the screen, so not a requirement that you use it. Hopefully that worked for you all. So let's start our very first activity. Okay, let's take about 3 minutes to answer these reflection questions that I just shared. Why am I interested in pivoting careers? What does a successful career look like to me? What am I afraid of? What am I willing to sacrifice or not sacrifice? I realize that these are loaded questions, so just write down a few words for each. The first thing that comes to your mind. You are always welcome to revisit these activities after our live stream is over. My goal is to just give you a taste of each tip and each step in the pivoting process so that you have the tools you need to continue working on your pivot after this training is over. So I will play some music and set a timer for 3 minutes, and I'll let you know when that timer is up. About 30 seconds. Okay, welcome back. I'm sure that went by very fast, but that's okay. I'm sure there's a lot more you could write, and you are welcome to continue working on this after the live stream is over. And your career journey should include regular check-ins with yourself to make sure you are on the right path. So I highly encourage lots of reflection. Let's move on to tip number 2. The next tip is to do your research to identify your knowledge, skill, and experience gaps. This is a big step in the pivoting process. So basically, research what it takes to succeed in the role that you're interested in. The way I went about this when I was looking to pivot from project management to instructional design was I read lots of job descriptions and noted which knowledge, skill, and experience gaps I did have and I did not have. I researched different industries, sectors, and even individual organizations to narrow down what environment I was aiming for. I read tons of articles and blogs and books. I watched lots of YouTube videos. I listened to podcasts related to my future career and collected as much information as I could. And of course, I talked to people. I conducted a lot of informational interviews, which we will talk about in a little bit. And I took all of this and I took a bunch of notes to just gather everything I learned from this research. And the goal of this step is really, it's twofold. The first part is to solidify your direction. This is a gut check to make sure that this pivot is actually a smart and viable move and that it still interests you right now, which you might learn after your research that it doesn't or something else does. And then, of course, it's also to identify your knowledge, skill, and experience gaps, so then you can work on filling them. All right, it's already time for our second activity. Since we don't have time right now to conduct in-depth research, we're going to instead focus on the gaps we already know that we have. So take about 2 minutes and write down any knowledge gaps, skill gaps, or experience gaps that you know that you currently have right now and that you know you'll need to fill before pivoting your career. So for example, if you want to become a coder, a knowledge gap might be you don't understand the many different ways that engineers and web developers collaborate. Or a skill gap might be you have not learned Python. Or an experience gap might be that you've never worked in the tech industry before. So those are all just some examples to get you thinking. Again, I'm going to play some music and set a timer for about 2 minutes. About 30 seconds. Okay, thank you for doing that second activity. As with all of these activities, I welcome you to go back and revisit this after the live stream is over, and I highly encourage you to do lots and lots of research so you're well informed about your career pivot. But hopefully this activity gave you a good starting point of what gaps you might need to fill before you attempt to pivot your career. So if you are one of the lucky ones and you learned in our last step that you have 0 knowledge, skill, or experience gaps, then you are welcome to skip step number 3. But for the vast majority of us, the next step is to upskill ourselves. And upskilling means improving your knowledge or your skills or your experience so that you can become a desirable candidate for the position that you're interested in. And now that you've identified the major gaps you need to fill, it is time to start filling them. But luckily, there are many free or low-cost options to do this. For example, books, podcasts, videos, webinars or conferences or events, courses and certifications, community groups or mentorship opportunities, or Codecademy. I'll let Fede drop some Codecademy resources in the chat if you'd like. And I'd like to point out, I'm not listing degree programs. I'm not mentioning going back to school. There are many low-cost and self-study options available to you that you can start using today. And it's up to you how much money you're willing to spend to advance your career. But my advice is to weigh the cost of the professional development activity against its benefits that it might provide in landing a new career, a better salary, improved work-life balance, etc. So personally, I paid for 2 online certification courses in instructional design, which greatly improved my knowledge and skills and gave my resume a boost. Other than that, I completed the rest of my upskilling through only the cost of a couple books. So for example, one of the technical skills that I knew I had to learn was how to use a software called Articulate Storyline, which is an e-learning development software for people who are in instructional design. I wasn't able to download a free trial since it wouldn't run on a Mac, but I do highly recommend free software trials as a great upskilling option. So what I did is I watched a bunch of YouTube videos on how to use this particular software until I developed a solid understanding of it. And after that, I felt confident enough in my ability to master my storyline skills when finally able to get my hands on the software, so that I added it to my resume as something I am, quote, familiar with. So for this, you have to be a good judge of your own abilities and your own capabilities. But again, I highly recommend gaining exposure to something and then expressing familiarity with it as a great way to give your resume a boost, to answer interview questions, etc. I'd also like to note that upskilling requires a lot of intrinsic motivation, scrappiness, and grit. If you are serious about changing your career, then you need to become a serious student of that particular career and teach yourself what you need to know. If this is something that you struggle with, consider finding a study buddy that you meet with regularly to hold each other accountable. Or even better, I recommend working with a career coach. Time for our third activity. Let's take about 2 minutes to search for some resources that might help you upskill yourself. So for example, you could Google videos on how engineers and web developers collaborate, or Python online courses. And then note in your document a few resources that catch your eye and that you'd like to explore more after this live stream is over. And if you'd like, feel free to share one of those resources in the chat so that others can benefit from it. Again, I'll play music and I will set a timer for about 2 minutes. About 30 seconds. Okay, thank you for working on that activity. I hope it got you thinking about the different avenues available to you for upskilling yourself. And I hope you continue to do some research after this live stream. Let's move on to tip number 4. Now it is time to lock in your elevator pitch or your personal brand. I highly recommend about 1 to 4 sentences at the top of your resume and on your LinkedIn profile that summarize what you're all about. So, what can you uniquely offer an organization? What are you interested in doing? What have you accomplished? How do other people describe you? Your personal brand or blurb, it doesn't have to include everything on this list, but it should include enough to, quote, sell yourself. And you can also use this branding language in many situations, like when you're networking with people, answering interview questions, etc. So it's really handy to have a lot of clarity around what you have to offer. Because the reason we do this is because people hire people who have a strong sense of self and who know exactly who they are and what they offer the world. And this step in the pivoting process can be very challenging. So take time to mull it over. You will likely go through many iterations until you are satisfied. I also highly recommend asking friends and family and even some colleagues how they would define your personal brand. When I asked my boss this almost 10 years ago, she said my brand was high quality, and I have been using this description in my cover letters ever since. Again, if you are struggling to decide on your direction or identify your strengths and unique offerings, I recommend working with a career coach, and I'm happy to chat with you. Real quick, here are my personal examples of how I went from defining my personal brand as a project manager to defining my personal brand as a learning and development professional. So in 2019, My project management resume read as follows: exceptionally detail-oriented and organized professional with the ability to simultaneously manage multiple teams and projects to deliver measurable results. Analytical by nature, both numerically and linguistically, yet friendly and team-oriented, seeking opportunities to leverage and build upon project management experience. It's a decent description, but you'll probably agree with me that it's a little dry, doesn't have a whole lot of personality. So in 2021, when I was shifting into learning and development, this is how my personal brand read. I have always been an educator at heart, as evidenced by playing teacher at 3 years old with worm students in my backyard. I'm a strong believer that the foundation of successful learning is clear communication, and working as an interpreter and editor has helped me hone this skill. My fondness for learning goes beyond developing effective and engaging content. I delight in conducting assessments and measuring impact too. As a perpetual learner myself, I apply empathy to all that I do. This one, I believe, gives the reader a much stronger idea of my personality, what matters to me, and what makes me very unique. And I wasn't afraid to be a little silly too. These are just 2 examples, and there were many iterations between them, and there have been many iterations since. Your goal here is to make yourself sound intriguing so that others want to learn more. And my note here is enthusiasm is everything. So, time for our 4th activity. Now, you're not going to have enough time to fully define your brand in 3 minutes. It took me hours to write mine, so no pressure. But I want you to start brainstorming what you could include in your brand blurb or your elevator pitch. So jot down anything that comes to mind related to your professional interest areas, your unique skills or experience or perspective that you offer the world, or your accomplishments and results. And if you need help thinking of ways to describe yourself, I'm going to share a link with Fede so he can put it in the chat for me. Let's see here, getting the chat back for Fede. If you don't mind putting that in the chat, that would be great. It is a link to 125 positive words and adjectives that a person can use to describe themselves. So if you need some help getting those creative juices flowing, feel free to reference this article, but you don't have to, no requirements there. And again, this is just the very beginning of your brainstorming of your brand. Do not expect to have written any sentences within 3 minutes. Just jot down ideas and words. And again, I'll play some music and set a timer for about 3 minutes. About 30 seconds. Okay, welcome back. After this live stream is over, I encourage you to start drafting your unique personal brand and ask those close to you for feedback. And this wraps up our 4 steps related to the preparation period of the pivoting process. And next, we will move on to what to do when you're ready to actually pivot. So before we move on, I can pause here and see if you have any questions for me on these first 4 tips. Feel free to type in the chat. I'll also ask Fede if have you seen any questions come up throughout the webinar so far?
There were a few, and hopefully the people that asked those questions can retype them in the chat. It will be hopefully in case that everybody, I feel like a couple of you in the chat were asking a similar question, so maybe we can just answer it all in one go instead of repeating ourselves. So yeah, if you guys could retype them in the chat, that would be great. That way we just don't have to repeat it in case that is the same or similar question. I see
Sure.
that somebody already asked in the chat one question.
Yes, Danielle asked, where are good places to include your personal brand statement? Great question. I think it should be included anywhere that people are looking at you. So your resume, usually people have a little summary section at the top. That is a perfect place for your personal brand. If you have a LinkedIn profile or other professional social media profile, there's usually an opportunity to have a little blurb about yourself. If you have a portfolio or a website, absolutely a great place to have on a great thing to have on your homepage. And then again, I use it also to answer interview questions. So like when I'm prepping for interviews, they might ask me about my background or what I uniquely offer, or the really difficult question of describe yourself, tell me about yourself. Great opportunity to use your personal brand as well. And then we got another one from Kimberly. I'd love to gain a feasible time frame for career switching, as well as what changes need to appear on resumes and LinkedIn profiles. Yeah, really good questions. Difficult to answer because I think it is a case-by-case basis as far as the time frame. I think what you'll realize as you go through these first 4 steps is you'll start to develop a better idea of your time frame. So if you learn, you can do some real low-hanging fruit, easy lifts to boost your resume, and then you are good to go to start applying and getting this next job. Awesome. It might move a little bit quicker for you. And it also just depends how hard you work, how much of a priority this is, and how quickly you go through the whole pivoting process. That's really up to you. But again, working with a career coach could be really helpful in breaking it down into manageable small chunks at a time and developing an actual timeline and an actual game plan together. But it will be on a case-by-case basis. And your other question about, yeah, changes to your resume, again, so for example, remember I said I went from project management to instructional design. I had a lot of titles and jobs that weren't really instructional design related, but when I realized I wanted to go into that field, I made a lot of tweaks where I highlighted skills and experience that people in instructional design would be looking for. And I didn't really highlight the ones that they don't really care about. So there's a lot of aspects of project management that people in instructional design wouldn't really be looking for, and I didn't really include them. And then things like training my own team, leading projects independently, other skills that I knew were important, as well as certifications and technical skills are what I highlighted. So it's great to tweak it based on your audience and based on what you're aiming for. And that's where your brand blurb can be really handy too. Again, highly recommend working with a career coach if you want help with that, about how to basically brand your entire resume to the audience that you're aiming for. More questions. Let's see. How can one effectively address concerns about age when transitioning careers and competing with younger candidates for positions? Eva, great question. Unfortunately, there is some bias around age out there that we can't do a whole lot about as far as the way the world sees age. But I think age is such an asset, and because basically it means experience. So I think what I would recommend is focusing on your diverse experience, your deep experience, your building up your resume as far as how much you have to offer compared to those people who are fresh out of school or have only had one job or are touching tasks or projects for the very first time. I think if your brand perhaps could be highly experienced, and you can kind of spin it in that way about why this is such a positive thing. I know that's a pretty high level answer. We could talk about it more for sure if you wanted to book a free consultation about what exactly your background is, but and kind of make a little bit more of a game plan there. But great question. How do you make up for the lack of experience required for a new position? Yeah, Roman, that is, I mean, the knowledge piece and the skill piece and the experience piece, they're all important gaps to fill. The experience one can be really tricky sometimes because if you just, for example, if you haven't worked in tech, you haven't worked in tech. Like that's just the situation at the moment. I will get to, in a couple more tips, some examples of how you can still gain experience, even having not had a job in a particular field. But I think so we will get to that, but focusing on your knowledge and skills and beefing those up as much as possible so you gain confidence, you gain experience in that way, and you can really speak to those skills will hopefully be enough, plus a little bit of some low risk experiments that you'll be learning about in just a minute. So hold that question. What was the biggest mindset adjustment that supported your journey in changing careers? What a good question. That is a great question. I'd say that for me, I have a couple ideas. For me, it is about not fearing failure or rejection, knowing that this is going to involve, as I mentioned earlier, some grit and some scrappiness. So that was a big adjustment of being like, you know what? If this doesn't work, I'm not going to die. I'll be okay. I'll still have a job. I'll still be able to support my family. Like it's okay. This is just something I'm going to try. Let's see what happens. So that was really helpful to me. And I know that's much easier said than done, but kind of just realizing life is short. I want to try things that I want to try. Let's see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, I'll pivot to something else. So kind of just having that confidence and trust in yourself that you'll figure it out and you'll be okay no matter what. So I know I can't just say think that way and then you'll be able to think that way, but that was a really helpful mindset adjustment for me. So recommend it. More questions. What should I write in my brand statement if I have no experience in that field? From Raphael. Yes. So that's totally okay. If you have no experience in that field, you still have knowledge, you still have skills, you still have things to speak to. You're still a unique person with unique offerings. I would just highlight those. What is your perspective? What do you care about? What do you not care about? Basically, like for example, my brand blurb about learning and development talked about I care a lot about clear communication from my experience as an interpreter, and I've also worked as an editor. That's unique. A lot of people in learning and development might not care that much about communication, but care about some other aspect of it. But I highlighted that because that was a unique skill set that I had that does apply to this particular field that not many other people are talking about. So it made me stand out as this is something I'm really good at. It's really important to me. It's part of the quality that I'm going to provide you if you hire me. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Great questions. I think I got through all of them. And I think we can move on. Don't worry, we're going to pause for questions again. So feel free to keep thinking about them, but great questions. let's move on to the second half of our tips. Time for part 2. We are more than halfway there. So, to recap, you have reflected on your goals. You have identified your gaps. You have started to upskill yourself, and you've defined your personal brand and what you have to offer. Thanks to all of that preparation, you are finally ready to make a move and actually pivot your career. Tip number 5 is everyone's favorite thing in the world, networking. I know the majority of people dread networking, but it really, truly does work, and I'm going to explain why. So, according to the book Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, only about 5% of jobs are landed through the traditional model of sending resumes and cover letters through job applications. 5%. And as if that wasn't bad enough, only about 20% of available jobs are even posted online. That means 80% of the jobs that are out there are never posted anywhere where you can find them. So what does all of this mean? You have to network. I know, but believe me, it is worth it. So how do you find people to network with? LinkedIn is an incredible resource for this, and it is completely free. There are other professional networking sites like Handshake and many others out there that you are welcome to explore, but let's just focus on LinkedIn today because it is probably the most well-known. So how do you find people? First, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date and complete with your brand blurb and your resume and your photo and everything. And then add everybody you know. So connect with your childhood classmates and your professors and your former colleagues and your second cousins and your pickleball partners, literally everyone. As long as you don't have a bad relationship with them, add them. That is the point of LinkedIn. It is all about building a network. Then search among your first connections to see if anyone is working in the field or the role that you are interested in. If dozens of people fall into this category among your first connections, then you are in great shape. But if very few or none show up, that's fine. It just means it's time to consider some second level connections. And you'll have to consider who among your first connections you feel comfortable enough asking for an introduction to a second level connection that you find. That can be a really handy way to make a connection. But now let's talk about how you actually network. When you found somebody that you want to network with, whether you know them personally or a mutual connection has introduced you to them, it's time to ask for an informational interview. Informational interviews are low risk for both parties involved. You are just asking to hear about their career path and current work and ask for some advice. That's it. And remember, most people enjoy talking about themselves and most people enjoy giving advice. So don't feel bad about asking for this. But if they say no, or if they don't respond, do not take it personally. You have lots and lots of options available to you. So when you ask for your informational interview, you can use part of your elevator pitch or your personal brand to introduce yourself and your goals. I recommend you probably need to tweak it to make it sound a little less salesy, like not something that would read from a resume, but it's a great way to describe yourself and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I've been doing. This is what I want to do. This is what I have to offer. So consider using it when introducing yourself or when talking to them live. And then make sure, then ask 20 to 30 minutes of their time to hear about how they got into the field and what advice they might have for you. And then make sure that you are prepared with a list of thoughtful questions to ask ahead of the interview. So read their profile in advance to ask them personal questions about their own career journey. Consider what aspects of their job you are most curious about and write down those questions. Ask them for advice on how to break into the field or what skills are most important, etc. And remember, you are running this meeting. So have an agenda prepared, have your questions written down, take ownership of the conversation, and don't go overtime unless they say it's okay to go over. And then if the conversation goes well, you can casually ask at the end if they know of any current openings that would be a good fit for you. If they say no, no problem. You can just ask if there's anyone else they recommend you talk to. And just like that, you are networking again. Now it's time for our fifth activity. If you have a LinkedIn account, please log in and search for people that you'd like to network with in the field you're interested in, and write down 3 names or 3 people that you'd like to talk to. If you don't have LinkedIn, I do highly recommend you get it, but you don't have to do that right now. You can search other social networking sites you have, or even just pause and think about who in your life might be a good starting point to network with, or who might be a good mutual connection that can introduce you to somebody. And write down 3 names as well. I will play some music and give you about 2 or so minutes. About 30 seconds. Okay, I love that someone wrote in the chat, they wrote down 10 names. That is fantastic. Uh, I do recommend when you are ready to do your pivot to network with dozens and dozens of people to increase your potential opportunities. And it will get easier every time you do it, I promise. Okay, while you are actively networking, it's time to run some low risk experiments. So this might speak to one of the questions that we got earlier. This will help you build your skills, boost your resume, and confirm again that this is the right career for you. So here are some examples of what a low risk experiment might look like. You could ask for opportunities to use the skills that you're interested in your current work. So for example, you could take on a small coding project if you want to learn to code. You could test your skills on friends and family by doing some work for them for free, like building them a website. You could offer your services through a contractor marketplace and take on some small gigs to see how that goes. You could start a book club among like-minded friends who want to discuss or even practice these skills, or an enterprise resource group at your place of work for those who are interested in discussing this particular subject matter. You could participate in online community spaces and forums to help others by answering their questions or addressing their challenges, such as community at Codecademy. And you could volunteer in the space that you're interested in. So the way I went about this when I was pivoting from project manager to learning and development was I found a part-time volunteer job as a learning and development manager at a startup company. So I worked about 5 to 10 hours per week for free, in addition to my full-time job. And I developed learning and development content with a team of other volunteers. This was an excellent way to test my skills and build my confidence and gain some leadership experience and experiment with my instructional design process via trial and error in a safe and low-risk environment because I wasn't being paid. And I added this role to my resume under my volunteering section, and I'm certain that it helped me land my first instructional design job, which I started just 3 months later. It is time for our 6th activity. I recommend that you go to volunteermatch.org and search a keyword based on the career that you'd like to pivot into. You will have to, on the homepage, click on Find Opportunities. There's a button at the top. And then that will bring you to a page where you can filter through keywords or by virtual or in person or by skills or causes that you care about. But you have to click that button first to get to that filter page. So this website is how I found my learning and development volunteer role. You'd be surprised how many business-related volunteer jobs there are. And I ask that you do a little search, note anything that pops up that might interest you in your activities document. I'll play some music and give you about 2 minutes. About 30 seconds. Okay, welcome back. Again, after this live stream is over, I recommend and continuing to search for volunteer opportunities if this is a low-risk experiment that interests you. If not, definitely explore some of the other ideas that I shared. And now for our final tip, it is time to plan your route. As in my own career journey, pivots often don't happen overnight or in one simple step. You might remember that I pivoted from a project manager at a real estate firm to a project manager at an educational company, to an instructional designer for the federal government, to an instructional designer at a private company. And each of these jobs were strategic stepping stones to eventually land my ideal job. The famous career advice book called What Color is Your Parachute by Richard N. Bowles outlines the 3 different ways that you can pivot your career. And I thought it was an excellent way to describe this, so I am going to provide the example that is in the book. So in this example, you are currently an accountant in the television industry, but you want to be a reporter in medicine or in healthcare. The most difficult path would be to pivot in one step and change both your job title and your industry at the same time. It can be done, but the chances of success are much lower and it's a pretty big uphill battle. So the easier way is to break down your pivot into 2 steps. You can either pivot your title first while staying in the same industry, or pivot your industry first while keeping the same title. So as you can see on this diagram, if you go from A to C, you change your title from accountant to reporter while staying in the television industry. Or if you go from A to B, you keep working as an accountant, but you switch from television to medicine. And then after you work in that space for a little while, you build up your experience, you build up your resume, you're ready to make that final pivot over to D as a reporter in medicine. And the route that you take can and will be unique to you and your current situation. But it's important to plan your route in advance while also leaving room for flexibility if things change or opportunities arise. So time for our 7th activity. Let's take 2 minutes to write down a few different routes that you could take to pivot your career. So what would it look like if you changed your title first or if you changed your industry first? Or what would be a good first job to aim for? Or what other possible routes could you take? There are no wrong answers here. This is just a brainstorming activity to get you thinking about the different creative approaches you could take. I'll give you about 2 minutes while I play some music. About 30 seconds. Okay, awesome job. I hope that you continue to work on your strategy for getting from your current job to your ideal job and consider different routes that you can take. This marks the end of our 7 tips. I think I'm just going to power through and wrap up with our final activity, and then we will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Okay, my friends, we've made it through our 7 tips. Let's quickly recap them, and then I'd like to wrap up with some goal setting so that all your hard work today doesn't go to waste. I know I just threw a lot out at you, so let's recap what these 7 tips are. While you are preparing to pivot, first, reflect. Reflect on your goals, your priorities, what matters to you, why you're even doing this. Identify your knowledge gaps, your skill gaps, and your experience gaps. Work on upskilling yourself through low-cost or free options. And define your personal brand and what you have to offer the world. Then it's time to make your move. Network, network, network. Run low-risk experiments to test your skills and build your confidence. And finally, plan your route from your current job to your ideal job. It's finally time for our very last activity. Reflect on your notes from all of the activities that we did today, and then set one achievable goal for yourself that you will complete this week that will move you one step closer to pivoting your career. So for example, maybe your goal is to read 10 job postings that interest you and jot down your knowledge and skill gaps. Or maybe update your LinkedIn profile and connect with everyone you know. Or maybe register for the Codecademy course that you've had your eye on for a while. Those are just some examples, but take about 2 minutes and set a goal for yourself. About 30 seconds. Okay. Thank you so much for doing those 8 activities. I hope that this last one gives you an idea of what it feels like to break down your pivot into small and manageable goals, so that you can be successful. It's very helpful to chunk things down, set a goal for yourself a week or whatever time frame works for you so that you don't get overwhelmed. I want to thank you all for your time and your participation today. You've been an incredible audience. Thank you for all the lovely comments in the chat. You've accomplished a lot during our short time together, so I hope you feel very proud of yourselves. If you want to dive into these concepts even deeper with a career coach, please contact me. I offer a free consultation, and if you mention this live stream, I will offer 20% off any of my services. My email and website and LinkedIn are on the slide, and I will also ask Fede if he doesn't mind to put these links in the chat. Once again, both my free consultation link as well as my website. I want to thank you all for joining me today. And now I will pass it back over to Fede to see if you all have questions that I can answer for you.
Fantastic. I definitely know that I learned something new today, so I hope that the audience did too. Um, Always great to see people in the chat asking questions. Actually, I saw a question from way earlier when we started the live stream.
Yeah.
Kaylee was actually curious to know what got you into being a sign language interpreter.
Oh, very interesting question. So actually, my grandmother was deaf. She became deaf later in life, like in her mid 40s, very suddenly. So she actually never learned sign language, but she was my exposure to a deaf person for the very first time. And she encouraged my interest in sign language. I was curious about the deaf community. I was curious about the language. So she would buy me books and videos on sign language. I also think the language just spoke to me in a unique way because of I was a quiet kid. I liked the idea of expressing myself in a quiet way. I also was a dancer and I felt like expressing myself through movement made so much more sense to me. So I was really drawn to it for many different reasons. And I dabbled in it as I got older. And finally, when I graduated from college, I said, you know what? I really want to try this. I want to see if this is something I could do. So it was really, I'm so grateful for that time, even though I'm not currently pursuing it. It's so cool to have learned that language.
I guess in a way, it's almost like you pivoted into another language. So maybe your first ever pivot.
That's a good point. I'm sure we've all been pivoting since a very young age without even realizing it.
I see that Kimberly has a question for you in the chat.
Okay, Kimberly, let's see. How important is physical relocation when switching a career, especially when that field has a geographical hub, for example, Silicon Valley? Oh, good question. Again, I think that is a case by case basis. There are so many jobs these days, especially in tech, that you can do online. I think since COVID hit, we all have really adapted to doing things virtually. I personally think most jobs can be done virtually, but it depends on the employer, right? It depends on what matters to them. It depends on what kind of opportunities they provide remotely. So there's a few different ways you could go about this. If it does not interest you at all to relocate, then that's totally fine. That's a boundary you set for yourself. You only look for remote work or work exactly where you are located. If you're open to it, maybe do a little bit of research first to see what kinds of companies or organizations in that particular geographical location interest you. What would it take to get those jobs? See what kinds of opportunities would be available to you before actually making that move so that it isn't done in vain. And again, I think working with a career coach on the pros and cons and kind of just digging deeper into the root reasoning for this move or not for this move would be really helpful. So I recommend talking it through with a coach or with a close person in your life.
Great. And while we wait for other people to drop their questions, I actually have one myself, and it's related to the 7 steps. And, we talked about reflecting and visualizing the journey and what you're going to have to do next. How one of the problems that we run a lot into in our community spaces here for people trying to pivot into tech is that sense that never goes away of imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough. I don't have the correct background. I don't have the correct experience. I'm not going to be taken seriously. So when you're working through this and you're trying to put it all together so you can have a successful career pivot, do you have any tips on how to overcome that dread feeling of imposter syndrome and not maybe feeling like you don't belong where you're trying to go?
What a great question. There's so much we could talk about around imposter syndrome. It's plaguing so many people these days. It's a real thing. First, I will say you have so many skills, so much knowledge, and so much experience, whether or not you have ever worked in this particular role or this particular industry. So you need to remind yourself of that. You have so much to offer. You're already a very talented person. It's just about channeling your past experience and those talents in the right direction and in the direction that you're aiming for. So be kind to yourself and remember that you have so much to offer. There are, as far as individual tips, because of course, easier said than done to just remember this about yourself. Working with a coach or someone else close to you, as far as actually doing some activities like brainstorming and writing down all the different skills you have to offer. Let's see how long that list can get. Writing down those transferable skills. You can do lots of different games and activities and just brainstorming sessions with somebody like a career coach that can help you reframe your thinking, reset your mindset. Also, you can dig a little bit deeper into like truly what's causing this imposter syndrome. So I do recommend talking to people that you feel comfortable talking to, digging into what's really causing it to identify the root problem. But all that to say, you have no reason to have imposter syndrome. I promise you, you are totally capable and you can make this move in just a few months if that's what you want to do. You are ready, you are capable, and you can take on the world.
We are ready. Wow. Thank you for the inspiration. I see that we have one more question coming from Mr. Gichi.
Okay. Do you have any advice in terms of competing against people with college slash university degrees versus being self-taught? Ooh, that's a good one. Let's see. So, I mean, I'm a great example of that actually. Instructional design is a degree. You can get a bachelor's or a master's, possibly even a PhD in instructional design. I do not have any of those, but I have other degrees. I have other pieces of experience that I highlighted. I find that it will be employer dependent. Some employers, for whatever reason, care so much about academics. Not a whole lot you can do there if that is a priority for them. But I'd say most these days are being more flexible about it. For me, I just beefed up my resume in a way that made me look really experienced. I happen to have a master's degree. It's not in instructional design, but it never hurts to just have something, right? And I think I had everything that was needed to be considered. If you are in a particular industry where the college or university degree is huge, is highly important, I think maybe getting some certifications, something like not as grand a scale as going back to school for multiple years, but maybe spending a couple $1,000s on some certifications or online courses so you can show you are academically trained in this space. And then again, it's all about the way you design your resume, your profile, the way that you brand yourself. And I'd be happy to chat with you in a free online consultation if you want to talk more about what your challenges are.
Fantastic. All right. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I guess I'll just go ahead and ask a bonus question for me. And that is when thinking about pivoting careers, I've heard of some recruiters that say that there is a really fine line between being exploratory and interested in a field and coming across unattached or not serious enough, where sometimes recruiter will say, well, if we are hiring somebody that is in a junior role, maybe you come in with no experience, but they're still willing to take a chance on you based on your past experience or things that are related to the role. They still want to hire somebody that seems to be serious, I guess, about that role and that career. So do you think that there is something to it about identifying yourself as a pivoter, I guess, or saying, yeah, I worked in a different field, but now this is what I want to do, and how you communicate that doesn't mean that you're not has fully committed to that field as somebody that has more experience or that has done it in the past?
Yeah. I think you pretty much answered your question there. I think it's all about the way that you communicate your past, your present, and your future goals. So I think it's always a good idea to be transparent, meaning saying, you know what? I was a sign language interpreter for 7 years. It's kind of funny to think about that now. It's not related to what I do. I did it for these reasons. I learned so many things from this, but I also learned it wasn't the right fit for me. And during that time, I did some real self-exploration and discovered that I'd much rather be doing this. And I think just being able to tell your story makes you interesting, makes you trustworthy because you're willing to share. I don't think it should, in my opinion, harm your chances at all. I think it makes you human. And I think a lot of people these days appreciate diverse backgrounds. Some people are in the same field for 20, 30, 40 years. That's fine. They're obviously incredible at what they do. But I also think we put a lot of weight and praise around people who've tried a lot of things, had a lot of life experience. So I don't think it should hurt you. I think it just comes down to being able to tell that story in a way that makes it sound like it actually helped you. It helped build your character, build your knowledge and experience, and it's only a benefit to your future career.
Okay, so with that, I reposted all the chat in the chat all the links. And please, I would like to first thank you so much, Madeleine, for stopping by and sharing all this awesome knowledge with all of us today. I think that I saw some comments in the chat about how they feel like in this hour they've done more for their career pivoting that they've accomplished in the past month. So definitely you accomplished your goal number one today, which was disseminating all this awesome knowledge. And I also wanted to thank you for answering questions from the chat. I know that everybody is in a different journey and different places in their journey, but everybody, I think it's very encouraging to sometimes just ask questions and feel like you're not alone. And when you're trying to go down this road, that sometimes it feels like it's you against the world. So thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for stopping by with the community. And for the attendees, thank you for stopping by as well and asking awesome questions. We'll see you running other events in the community. So please go check out Codecademy for any upcoming community events that we're having. Go check out our blog or socials, all that good stuff. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to be notified when we do one more of these. And I hope that you all have a wonderful day and a great week. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.